Hi, my name is Jen Avellaneda, and today I want to share with you a little bit about respite basics, the who, what, when, why, and how of respite care. As a foster parent over the past 16 years, there have been times where my husband and I have desperately needed a respite care. We have often taken kids that come directly into care, which would be like emergency or receiving care. They're kids that come from maybe tragic or hard situations. But more recently, after adopting our 4 daughters from foster care, we have found such joy in doing respite care. We have loved having little ones in our home and seeing our own kids just wrap around these kids. So what is respite care? Let's break this down just a little bit more. Respite care is a short break or an interval of rest that is needed for something difficult. So we are the ones as licensed foster parents or potential licensed foster parents who can offer that to another family so maybe they can sustain a placement longer than they would have if they hadn't had respite care. So who is respite for? Respite is for foster families who have taken a placement and maybe that placement is getting hard. Maybe there was a death in the family. Maybe they are just exhausted or their child has cerebral palsy or ADHD and they are just feeling exhausted. They need a short interval or a little bit of space and so they need help. And what would happen is maybe you potentially as a respite foster parent would take that child from them. It could be a day, it could be longer period of time so that you help them have that space and meet their own needs before getting that child returned to their care. Respite can also be for biological family members. It could be a grandparent that has their grandchild and they're needing space, so they are connected maybe somehow with the state, and so they partner with them to get help that they need. They may be having medical problems or a situation where they just need some space, and so a respite worker would come in that situation as well and help that family until they can kind of get back on their feet or what they need, and then that child would return to either the foster family or that biological family member. So respite care is different. I want to make this clear than having a foster placement in your home. There's so many differences and I could go on about this a little bit later in future videos, but respite care is really your kind of just helping another family who has that child in their home. So respite care is not made to be a long-term placement. It's not made for you to have guardianship or adopt that child. It's simply to help another family. So who can do respite care? In my state, I live in Washington State, you do need to be fully licensed as a foster parent to do respite. So to be able to legally take on that child as a placement in your home temporarily, you would need to be fully licensed. So that would be the home study and that would be the background check and just all the things, the first aid, CPR, to be able to do respite for another child. Each state is different. Maybe each agency is different. So make sure to check with your state to see what is required in your state to do respite. If you have maybe a family that you know in your church or your community or a relative that's going to need a break from a child and you want to help with the state involved and connected, I would definitely reach out to that child's social worker, to that current foster family or the family who is caring for that child and see what is required and then follow those steps so that you can become a licensed foster parent. In addition, if you just want to get licensed as a respite worker and really just take respite placements, that is so needed. There is always a huge deficit of respite foster parents. Most people think long-term or they want a permanent placement. Some people go in to adopt. Our family did not start foster care with the intention of adoption. Our primary goal was simply to foster and to focus on the reunification to children into healthy families, however, other people go about foster care for a different reason. And so not a lot of people really want a child for a temporary amount of time to be able to help other people. And so maybe you're an older person that you think, I don't want to raise children for years and years. I just want to help another family. You might be a great person to potentially to be licensed as a respite foster parent. So for us, there's been times that we have used foster care. One of the coolest times ever, I was in a Bible study at my church, and we were getting ready to go to China. And I was in the shower the morning before the Bible study, and I was kind of like, okay, God, you have called me to go here, but yet I have this beautiful daughter in my care. What do I do? God, you have to provide someone to step in. I think we were only gone for like 8 days, but I knew that those 8 days I needed a licensed respite worker. And I didn't just want anyone. I didn't want the state to just choose some random foster parent. I really wanted to know the family that this child was going to go into. And so I got to my Bible study, and sure enough, we get to this table and all these women are introducing themselves. And one lady said, I've adopted from foster care and I'm still licensed, but the thing is, I only want to do respite. It was like bells went off. It was like God had gone before me and really opened a doorway. And this friend of mine, her name is Lisa. She has been the biggest asset to our family. We have gone to China multiple times after that, as well as traveled. And she has always been there. And I am just so thankful for her and the way that God orchestrates, and he knows our needs even before we do. And he's there to meet them. And not just for us, but for the benefit and the good of that child. Lisa still is a dear friend and someone I treasure and will always treasure. She has a special place in our family and actually came to our girls' adoption ceremony at the courthouse. So it was a really cool friendship that God knew. He knew and he built through respite. So when do we need respite? We talked about that a little bit, but when you travel, when you go on vacation, when there's a medical need, when you just need a break, we are approved for respite as foster parents. Check with your state. I believe it's 1 weekend a month, and that can kind of add together. So if you need a week or 2 weeks, you can kind of reserve those days over time so that you can take vacation or something that you need to do if you feel like you can't take that foster child with you. There are just a lot of different scenarios and circumstances. Maybe there's a need in your home with a biological child or another adopted child, and you really need time to focus, but you want to keep this placement of a foster child. That might be a great time to get respite, to say, we love this child and we want to keep this foster child, but our family needs to focus on what's going on here, even just for a couple days. Maybe your marriage, maybe you need to get away with your spouse and just have a couple days for yourself. Those are great opportunities to step out and to reach out for respite. So how long is respite for? In my state, again, it's Washington State. And again, please check with the state that you're in. But in my state, we have something to where foster parents can seek out or have a relative or a trusted adult care for our kids for up to 72 hours. But over 72 hours, that is generally the amount of time that respite is needed. It can go from 72 hours, it can go to a couple weeks. It can potentially be longer depending on the circumstance and the family and the needs of that individual household. So where does respite take place? Respite, generally in my experience, we have used respite in the other person's home. So that is why, again, in Washington State, that other person's home needs to be fully licensed. So if a child that's in my care goes to another person's home, we know that that home is safe. We know there's plugins. We know there's nothing harmful or dangerous that could potentially hurt that child. So in my experience, usually the kids in my care go to that other person's licensed foster home, and that's where we've had respite. Respite can be done in our home. If you feel like the respite worker would better help in your home, the child is safe or has attachment issues or feels more comfortable, or maybe it's closer to their school or to visits or the office, that is a potential possibility as well. So those usually are the two locations that respite takes place. And we already talked a little bit about what is required for respite care. And again, in my state, is to be fully licensed as a foster parent. That can be done so much quicker. When we got licensed 16 years ago, it took, I think, like 9 months to get licensed. It took a long time, and now you can get licensed in 60 days. And so it seems like a big process, but the benefit and the help that you're giving to other foster families to get licensed, it will help so much. So again, that's first aid and CPR and a home study and an inspection and just all the things that would come with a foster license. Check with your state. It may be different. It may be simpler or it may be easier. And so definitely check that out and just take the first steps of looking into that to see what is required in your state. And lastly, I just wanted to give you my final thoughts about why respite. Why do we need respite? Respite is huge. I used to not really believe in respite. I thought I could power through and take on these kids and I don't need a break. I mean, that was when I started fostering 16 years ago. But over the years, I have realized that sometimes even just 2 or 3 days to have to myself or have with my husband or have maybe a little bit of space to really kind of reevaluate what I'm doing and why I am a foster parent to that child, it can change everything. It can mean that we could have kids another year or 2 years. There's been times that I honestly wish I would have got foster care respite. It would have benefited me. I could see potentially having kids longer or maybe potentially forever if I would have just reached out to get respite. And so these are the reasons why respite is so valuable. It is so important. And I'm so glad that you watched this. If you are potentially thinking about becoming a licensed respite worker, feel free to reach out. If you have questions about respite care, feel free to leave a comment. I'll try my best to answer all of those for you. And again, take the first steps. You might be surprised of how fun respite can be. Thank you so much for watching. And remember to go out, live bold, be brave, and we will see you next time.